As choir's been preparing for this morning, I find myself, I can't stop thinking, especially the 9 to 5 song, I find myself thinking about the time I spent working in a poultry processing plant when I was in high school. And the difference between that kind of work, I was not on the line, but I knew the people who were, and the difference between that kind of work and the work that so many of us do, the need for rest, and where can we get rest, and the importance of the Sabbath. So, opening words for Labor Day by Megan Dowdell. We enter this meeting house for kindness and comfort. May rough, worn hands and aching backs be healed. We enter this meeting house of hope for equality. May those who labor to survive live to know justice. We enter this meeting house of love and vocation. May our bonds of solidarity be strengthened. We enter this meeting house of courage and friendship. May we proceed hand in hand toward freedom.
And now please join me in responsive reading number 567 in your gray hymnal. Speaking of colors. I'll read the regular text and you can read the italicized. I want to be with people who submerge in the task. Who stand in the line and haul in their places. We're not part of the generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. Greek amorphous for wine or oil, Hopi vices that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
We all feel like blue crayon once in a while, just kind of beat down, can't look up over the top of the box, overused. According to economist Juliet Schor, the author of The Overworked American, having a chance to spend time not doing anything in particular is less common than it used to be. In her book, Schor documents the increase of time spent working, both paid employment and work around the house, over a 20-year period. She estimates that between 1969 and 1987, the amount of time per person per year, on average, the employed person spent on the job went up by 163 hours, or the equivalent of 1 month of work. The total amount of time spent on housework remained constant. So if we feel that our time is more squeezed, then we are spending more and more time working on our lists and less time on leisure activities. There is a good reason for it. It is ironic that this decline in leisure time came on the heels of revolutions in technology that were expected to provide us with more free time than any society has ever known. In the late 1950s, experts predicted that the 4-day week was soon to come, and that by the early 1990s, we would have either a 22-hour work week, a 6-month work year, or a standard retirement age of 38. Well, that hasn't happened. Rather than using the time we save through technology for leisure activities, we use it to get more and more work done. Schor claims in the past 40 years we could have cut our time in half without any decline in productivity, but instead of increasing our free time, we've actually reduced it. So what is this national disease that causes us to work harder and harder the more time we save? Clearly, the issues of work and overwork, vacation and leisure time have many dimensions. Economic, political, social. The fact that some people work 60 hours a week means that others do not work at all. Overwork and unemployment are closely linked. Some of us work extra jobs because that's what it takes to make ends meet. Or we work overtime because that's what helps us to keep our job. Others who ostensibly have more freedom to set their own schedules just don't manage to take the vacation they have coming to them. While the overwork disease displays itself in individual cases, it is at its root a cultural phenomenon. As the Utne Reader put it, our growing time crunch is often portrayed as a personal dilemma rather than the social problem it is. Shore and others have suggested several public policy remedies for this time crunch: shorter work weeks, more vacation time, longer maternity leaves, and time off to care for sick family members. These remedies sound good, but I don't think they reflect our deep-seated attitudes towards work and rest. Until we can make sense and begin to address these underlying attitudes, public policy changes just won't stick. One of the primary reasons for the overwork is the work ethic that operates in this country. This work ethic perverts the simple idea that work is good and healthy for human beings to the notion that our worth as human beings is directly linked to the quantity and quality of what we accomplish, and that we are most is what we do. Most of us could probably articulate reasons we don't agree with that notion, but I think it would take more attention on our part to exercise it completely, because the idea has deep roots in our spiritual and psychological past. Juliet Schor says the work ethic is a mostly Northeastern, Christian, bourgeois, middle, and upper class ethic, and also tends to be slightly more a male ideology. In our American culture, this work ethic is concentrated where most of the power in society resides. Hence, it's no coincidence that the work ethic of people in positions of power, both in business and government, have become the work ethic, or at least the behavior adopted by everyone else in order to keep up and fit in. Many UUs are a part of this dominant social power group, and their ways of thinking have had a disproportionate influence in shaping the values of society. In a way, we have held our culture hostage to exacting standards of how much we should work. The decisions that we make about work and rest are deeply personal, even spiritual decisions. They are also the foundation of the decisions that get made in the public realm. I want to say more about the spiritual roots of this work ethic legacy and the implication that it has for UU theology and our sense of who we are in the world. Many UUs, as well as Unitarian Universalist religious movement, came from a Protestant background. Our earliest religious forebears in this country were followers of the Reformation theologian John Calvin. Calvin's theology included a doctrine known as double predestination, the notion that the ultimate fate of all souls, whether they would go to heaven or hell, had been determined by God at the beginning of time. Nothing that anyone did in his or her lifetime could alter that fate. This was not a very comforting theological position. In fact, it was so uncomfortable that it began to be perverted with the idea that God would favor the elect, those going to heaven, by giving them a worldly success in this lifetime. Naturally, everyone wanted to believe that he or she was among the elect, and so the Calvinists worked very hard in order to prove by their successes that they were indeed destined for heavenly glory. Calvin's original fatalistic doctrine was turned on its head as his spiritual descendants wrestled with how to live under its judgment. There was a subtle shift from the idea that human effort had no effect on God's plan to the idea that human effort, if it produced good results, could be taken as a sign of God's plans. Hence, the connection was made deep in our spiritual history between a person's essential worthiness and his or her productivity. In Calvin's theology, every person's ultimate fate was open to question. Everyone was confronted with the existential dilemma: how can I prove that I deserve to live? When the alternatives are eternal blessedness or eternal damnation, it makes sense to spend as much time as possible accumulating proof on the side of blessedness, which in the case of Calvinists meant working and succeeding. This strict Calvinist theology has long been discarded in UUism, first by the Universalists and then by the Unitarians. In fact, One of the criticisms leveled against the early Universalists who argued that a loving God would ultimately save all people was that there was no need to earn one's way into heaven. There would be no incentive for good deeds or hard work. We now affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Inherent worth means that our ultimate value comes from the simple fact of our being. It is not tied to who we are and not to what we do. Even though we have dropped the old theology, I think the insidious connection between self-worth and productivity has remained, instilled somewhat subconsciously. In theology, you articulate, we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But in our subconscious theology, where Calvinism lingers, we have our doubts. What's inherently worthy about me, we wonder, and sometimes, what's inherently worthy about her? Then we're tempted to show, through tasks we accomplish, that we are indeed worthwhile human beings. The problem is this path doesn't do justice to either our work or to ourselves. Again, that's not me speaking. My husband likes to say, your life is worth more than your work, and your work is more than your life. The poet Marge Piercy describes work where people submerge in the task, work in a row, and pass the bags along. Move in common rhythm, doing the thing worth doing well. Well done. We are part of something much larger than ourselves that transcends our individual need for reassurance that we are worthwhile people. Work is worthy and good in and of itself. It's not a means to justify our existence. This is not to say we shouldn't be recognized, appreciated, and compensated for the work we do, but the value of work itself is not honored when we use it to try to convince ourselves and others that we are okay. On the other hand, no matter how satisfying and consuming our work is, we have being apart from our work, and we need that time to keep in touch with that being. There's a story about an explorer in South America who was traveling madly from one edge of the continent to the other, getting up before dawn every day and pushing his crew until sundown or later. One morning, his porters failed to appear. The explorer found them all seated under a tree, not doing anything in particular, but looking as if they were settled in for the better part of the day. When he asked for an explanation, one of the porters replied, "We have traveled far and we have traveled fast. Now we must allow time for our souls to catch up with our bodies." We must allow time for our souls to catch up with our bodies. Our souls are the cores of ourselves that exist and have worth regardless of anything that we do. They do need time to reconnect with our hardworking bodies. It is when we lose track of our souls that we forget about inherent worth and begin to think about that our work, our doing, can help us regain the basic sense of who we are. We need to schedule periodic times of rest and renewal, times when we can experience what it is just to be, by ourselves, with friends and family, in community. It's not easy to set aside this kind of time on a regular basis. Ritual and repetition help. Even if the deep soul connection doesn't happen on every occasion, the regular task of spending time just being can help us remind that we value ourselves. UU minister Elizabeth Tarbox describes the experience of going to the ocean just to be. I am with the broken stubble of the marsh grass that holds on through the wrecking wind and the burning flood. I am with the grains that mold themselves around everything, accepting even so unworthy a foot as mine, hoping and shaping until it feels that what I don't know ceases to embarrass me. What I do or don't do is of no moment now. Now I am here and grateful to be touched, calmed, and healed by the immense pattern of the universe. Reassured, I am called back to my life, to another day. For me, it's usually easier to make the time for being and not doing if I'm with someone else. That person's presence reminds me that it is worthwhile to spend this time with no end product in mind. On my own, the wealth of things that I feel I need do come spilling in, and I find it is difficult to fend them off. Another challenge I face is to keep my reconnection with soul time from becoming another form of work. The temptation is great to look for results, to wonder if I'm doing it correctly, or to judge my ability to sit quietly, to improve my skills, or to worry about spending too much or too little time. In fact, the Old Testament creation story provides us with a wonderful model for valuing both the work that we do and the rest that reminds us who we fundamentally are. On each of the first 6 days, God works, creating amazing substances, bodies, and beings. And at the end of each day, God surveys the accomplishments and pronounces them good. At the end of 6 days, God reviews all of creation and pronounces it very good. Then on the 7th day, God rests, blesses that day, and announces it as holy because of the period of rest that it provided. I leave you with this parting message about the value of both work and rest in our lives. All of creation, including humanity, is good. Work itself is good, very good. And the rest is holy. As we get connected, I'm going to share these closing words by Amy Bowden Friedman and Keith Cron. These hands connect us to one another. Become aware of the hands that you are holding, their warmth, texture, their weight. As an infant, these same hands reached out for nourishment of milk. As a child, these hands shakily wrote a name on paper for the first time. These hands have wiped away tears, clenched in anger, waved hello and goodbye countless times, and embraced loved ones. And now these hands are the tangible link that connects us to one another. Look and see those around you have experienced so much that is life. These hands have worked, are working, and will continue to work to make the world a better place. Go in peace, go in love, work for justice. Go forth and bless the world. Amen.